Well, greetings and a warm welcome to everyone here in the loft, everyone in the Zoom room, everyone part of the Vision Train, and everyone watching this on the recording. Welcome all to this third session of looking at human nature through the eyes of Carl Jung and Rudolf Steiner. Before we get into the content of tonight, I'll have some pictures to show you from a trip I took this weekend to the ROM. There I am. Hadn't been to the Royal Ontario Museum in a while, and I thought it's time to hang out with the dinosaurs. And there we have a very large dinosaur right in the entrance. So big, can't even fit all of it in the camera. See if you can guess which end is the head and which end is the tail. Is to the head to the left or to the right?
It looks like the head would be on the left. Challenging one. Because the hip, it looks like the hips are on the right-hand side.
Well, you are the lucky winner of that prize. Yes. To the left is the head, and to the right, as you can tell, are the hips and the tail. So big things there at the museum. Here's a big sea creature, some sort of turtle flying through the air at the ROM, but in the prehistoric days, obviously would be in the water. We've got a T-Rex looking over my shoulder. Fairly friendly. He looks ferocious, but I think he was just trying to smile. And there's a, what do they call that? I think a Sauroposeidon. Huge creature. This had to do a close-up to get up in its face. Yeah, not sure what these are called. Maybe Bonnie and Clyde. And one of these flying creatures, the pterodactyl. Interesting here, look at this hand. 5 fingers. Thumb. Who does that belong to? Belongs to this creature. Very human-like in its hands. Not so much in its head, but in its hands. And the Pachycetus, the first whale. Would you like to look at what the first whale was about? Here we go. That's what the whales began as. Believe it or not, I had a hard time believing that. This is an artist's rendition of this creature that has webbed feet that eventually evolved to be a whale with these 5 fingers. That's why a whale, within its fin, if you remove the skin of the fin, you'll find something that's very hand-like. And it's trying to give me a hand. Yeah. So just wanted to show you how big things were back in the past. We were talking about the giant oysters at the previous session. But before we go there, I left everyone on a bit of a cliffhanger with a quote from Rudolf Steiner, which I will repeat again at the beginning of this one to pick up our cliffhanger. Since people today on the whole can no longer think properly, they misunderstand what exists on Earth as plant, animal, and human. Thus, materialistic Darwinism arose, which believed that the animals were here first and that the humans simply developed out of the animals. It is true that in the external form, the human is related to the animals. But the human existed earlier, and the animals really developed later, after the world had gone through a transformation. And so we can say that the animals we see now present a later stage of an earlier condition when they were more closely related to the human. But we must never allow ourselves to imagine that out of the present animals, a human being could arise. That is a thoroughly false idea. Steiner also goes on to say how having the wrong idea, a false idea, the wrong image of things, such as about yourself, because of how you were raised, what you were taught in school, and therefore how your ego identifies, can have a big impact on what is manifested in your life. Because what is in the interior will come out into the exterior. Or what I've been saying from the beginning, belief is the basis of behavior. Our beliefs are the basis of our behavior. So what have been the ideas that we've been taught about ourselves personally and generally? Just a quick review of the conventional scientific theory that the universe had a beginning about 13 billion years ago with a big bang. Then our solar system got going about 4.5 billion years ago. And the more popular of the theories is the Kant-Laplace nebular hypothesis, where gas and dust aggregated together under the forces of gravity, forming a great golf ball in space. And that somehow began growing things on it. We're not sure how things began growing on this golf ball, but more than likely started really simple with one cell. Then took off, creating more cells, more creatures, where the survival of the fittest rules. There are lots of creatures gone now because of this ruling, survival of the fittest, including the dinosaurs, which we just looked at. Oh, except for this dinosaur. Forgot to show you my pet dinosaur, part of my animal collection in my bathroom. And also real dinosaur poop. No, it doesn't smell. It's millions of years old and fossilized. You too could pick up some of this at the local rock shop. Dinosaur poop. Reminds me of my past. Because all of those beings are now extinct, which then made more space for other creatures to see what they could do, including a shrew-like mammal, from which most of the world's warm-blooded creatures have ascended, including humans. Or should that be shrewmans? We shrewmans apparently evolved from shrews. Along with this sort of learning, you might have been raised with some religion too. And we know what Darwin introduced into society about 150 years ago. His theory of evolution caused a great division between the religious and scientific arms of society. So they don't necessarily get along or work well together, but they could. But because of the split that took place when Darwin brought his ideas in, there is a split that now runs right down the middle of the heart of many people, such as me, and possibly you too, where you love learning about all the things that science discovers, but at the same time, the absence of acknowledging anything spiritual in the universe causes an internal split, a split right down the middle of your heart. And this can be Cartesian anxiety from this Cartesian split between two seemingly true things that are not reconciled together. Now, this thing about the Big Bang I'll address in a later session when we look at the nature of the heart, because understanding the Big Bang and the heart actually go together. So we'll leave that for now. But in this session, which is called How Did the Human Hatch? We're going to address Darwin's theory, the origin of the species, which has caused, as I said, this rather painful wedgie for humanity. And we want to see if there is a middle path through this wedgie. We won't necessarily use Steiner's term, spiritual evolution, but we might think of this middle path as a creative evolution. And I find the term creative evolution an appealing one, and a lot less daunting than the survival of the fittest, right? And I like to ask people, is your life all about survival? Okay, raise a thumb if you think life is really all about survival. You can pop up the thumb reaction, or you can put up your thumb on the screen if you think life really is about survival. Okay, getting some no's here. Raise a thumb if you think survival is overrated. Right? Okay, survival is overrated, and there's more interesting things. Sorry?
Oh, just laughing. Excuse me.
Laughing. Okay. Right. There's more interesting things to focus on than survival, like making art, for example. Now, there is certainly an element of physical, mental, emotional, financial, and perhaps even spiritual, egoic survival to attend to when you get up each morning and decide what you're going to wear. But that's exactly my point. Despite the need to survive, there's also an element of style to living. I'd rather be thinking about what hat to wear today than about my paycheck. Why? Why is that? Because I think the cosmic intelligence is interested in style as well, and not just obsessed with survival. And I believe this thing about style is easily observable from the flowers on the planet to the birds to the humans, because evolution is not just about survival. We talk about the evolution of an idea, evolution of a fashion trend, evolution of musical styles. This, I believe, is because there is an artisanal aspect to the cosmic intelligence, which is why the universe is so big, because we are living and playing in a field of infinite possibilities. And ultimately, it's not about the survival of the self, which leads to social Darwinism and a dog-eat-dog world. But rather, it's about self-creation, being the fashion designer of your own existence as an offspring of the cosmic intelligence. And this can be fun. This can be fun because I believe the cosmic intelligence wants its offspring to have fun. In a word, levity. Levity, which is an important word I'll use again in a minute. But in order to get there, this place of levity, and to not fall into false ideas, which Steiner warns about, such as the half-truths of materialistic Darwinism, we need to get back to what? To thinking properly. That's what he stated. Thinking thoughts in our thoughtistry, right? As a thartist and artisans of our interior. Interior decorating of our inner realm. Maybe even a bit of a facelift, if I can use that term, to see the whole picture rather than half-truths. Then we don't have to face a fork in the road between science and religion and suffer from this grand wedgie but rather pursue a middle path, which we can call creative evolution, which is more inclusive of all parts of the picture. Speaking of pictures, let me show a bit more from my trip to the Royal Ontario Museum. And okay, can y'all see that? When I got there, I was going to see the dinosaurs, and I went upstairs to the second floor. I went in, and there was this whole new exhibit there that I hadn't seen before. And I spoke to the custodian there and said, "Is this new?" And he said, "Yeah, it just opened, or it's been in the process of opening over the pandemic, trying to, but literally just opened in the past few months. This new installation, permanent installation called Dawn of Life." Thought, this is great. This is exactly why I'm here. This is what I'm studying. But look here, the first thing underneath the title, Life's Astonishing Journey is Written in Stone. I thought, okay, that's not really going to align with what I'm teaching, where a lot of what Steiner is bringing through his clairvoyant seership and reading of the Akashic record, memory of the earth, is not written in stone, because there is stages of the earth's evolution where it was in different state, not like this golf ball, this solid golf ball that came together through dust and gas, but previous stages that were more fluid, more vaporous, and ultimately warmth. So already right off the get-go here in this exhibit, they're coming from the other fork in the road that thinks that we can just go into the fossil record and it's all written there. Some things are. This is an interesting thing I took a picture of because it kind of reminded me of those abalone oyster creatures with the hard top shell. These are called Cramboraster, had a huge shield covering their heads, not unlike an abalone. And this thing actually is fossilized. Here is showing one of these creatures fossilized in stone, so we can learn about them through the fossil record. But the giant oysters we spoke of, not, because at that time the earth was this slimy, warm soup consistency. See, we are having the benefit of the ideas offered by Rudolf Steiner, who as a seer is able to provide images and ideas that go beyond the fossil record, because not all of history is embedded and written in stone. That is a thoroughly false idea. If what Steiner says is correct, that earlier stages of the earth had a soft fluid consistency, and before that a vaporous aerofoam consistency, and before that warmth, none of that can exist in the fossil strata. From last week, reviewing the seasons of the solar system, the first iteration of the earth was ancient Saturn, where it was the warmth stage, then ancient Sun, when things were in an aeriform stage. Things in the ancient Moon became fluidic, and now Earth, things have become earthy, and of course there's a future stage. And this idea of how the solar system goes through seasons, we can get a sense of that because that's what happens here on Earth. We go through seasons, and the Earth is a mirror of cosmic principles, making the invisible visible, or as the alchemists used to say, as above, so below. As below, so above. So here on Earth, it's a mirror. It's kind of a repository of these invisible cosmic principles that are at work and come into visibility in the manifest Earth. And this is not so weird sounding, that there are invisible things at work, things that we can't see or hear. For example, I can't hear notes higher than the 88 keys on this piano. You could actually build a piano with more keys. I may not be able to hear those notes, but a dog could. A dog can hear things that are outside of the human range. Matter of fact, maybe someone should build a piano for dog owners. So then at least dogs could enjoy the notes in that range that's out of human hearing. See if there's a market for that. This is showing again the stages of old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and then the Earth stage. And we're showing the development of the human, right? Down here it says physical characteristics of the human, where in the beginning we were a system of heat and gaseous plant, liquid animal, and then finally solid human. So we've gone through these stages and seasons in our solar system, but here it's showing kind of the tweenies, I call them. The first season of the solar system, it is called the mineral human, where it was really laying down the physical nature of the human, although it was just warmth at that time. And then the human graduated at the next stage to be more plant-like, level of plant consciousness as plants are today. Old Moon, animal stage, and then now fully human. But there's parts of us that descended, that didn't actually graduate, and so they took this route down. And as you can see, that's what gave rise to these other life forms, these other kingdoms of nature, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, along with us. But where did it all originate? It all originated here at the inception of the human. So all of this is the human expressed in different forms. But there's these between stages, there's this descent down that really lays the foundation for we as humans now to stand upon the shoulders of other humans that are held back at the mineral, plant, and animal stage. So we'll look at this more in a minute. But the point is that it's all the human expressing itself in different ways, and parts of us didn't graduate, didn't evolve at the same rate, which is normal and natural. And I'll just mention that there is these between creatures, between plant and animal, animal and human and whatnot. For example, fungus is really neither plant or animal. Same with the vorticelli. Same with the Venus flytrap. Venus flytrap feeds off flies. It consumes animal matter. So these are vestiges of this evolution from the previous states, iterations of the Earth evolution that are still present upon our Earth. So let's talk a bit more about how this evolution took place. Was it really as Darwin states, or does Dr. Steiner have some other things? We need to get back to where we left off in the last session with what happened to these great giant abalone oysters. Well, these great oysters, for a season, they multiplied rapidly. They would die off, more would appear. And then when the sun separated from the earth, the external warmth of the sun radiating on the earth baked the top of these slime creatures, and they developed a top shell, as we see with an abalone today. They developed hard exterior, which, as I mentioned last time, when they aggregated together, they actually became the foundation of the continents that we have. That they, when they died and became fossilized, that is really the floating continents that we have, and our continents are floating. They've verified that. At one point, that idea of floating continents was considered heretical in the scientific community, but plate tectonics has now verified that they're actually floating because they are the remnants of these giant oysters the size of a country, all forged together, fossilized together. But there's more to the story than that, because this development of a hard exterior made them also kind of like the skull of a head, with this living slime still underneath the skull, which really is something like a head. This hard exterior skull and the slime inside, which was really the beginning of the brain development. That was the beginning of the brain development as we know it. So this is a wondrous and important development that took place, because the Earth now really at that point became something head-like. And I'm going to quote from Rudolf Steiner. He says, "Where can we find in our time a picture of the Earth as it was in ancient times? In the human head before birth, in the head of the human embryo. It presents a clear image of the Earth of that period. The embryo is nearly all head, and everything else is still very tiny." So he's saying the Earth at that stage really was a head. It was like this giant head in space, a great head. And we see that in the early stages of a fetus, it's mainly head. And even when a baby is born, which it does head first, head comes first, the head is disproportionately larger than the rest of the body. The rest of the body has these flappy limbs, and it takes a while for the rest of the body to catch up with this big head once it's born. So originally the Earth, we know, was in the sun, being fed within the sun, kind of like in a womb, like a fetus in a womb. And then when they separated, it was born out of the womb of the sun. And now it's being fed externally by the sun, which is acting like this external mammary. Another quote from Steiner: "The Earth was at one time like a living human head, and lived in the universe as we live in the Earth today." So this evolution from this warm soupy thing with the oysters and then the hardening shell on top, creating like a skull with the slimy inside being like the brain, that was the birth of the original human. That's where the human really took a step forward in becoming a physical embodiment. The Earth itself was the first manifestation of the human being. And in esoteric writing, this is referred to as Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon. Not the same as Adam and Eve, which refers to something else, but Adam Kadmon refers to the whole Earth as a human being. And in the Kabbalah, it is referred to as Adam had Kadmoni, which means the ancient man. The ancient man, which was really the collective essence of the cosmic human. And there are myths and stories in various cultures of a giant human long ago. In the German folklore, it's referred to as Ymir, the giant human. This is Adam Kadmon, when the original giant human was the entire Earth itself, a giant head-like organism. But the interesting thing about the head is, in a way, it's somewhat dead. The head of a human is the dead pole of the human, whereas the rest of the body is growing. The other pole, where our metabolic and reproductive organs are, this is the regenerative pole. It's producing life. But the head is more in death processes. It's more crystalline because of this hardness that's here. And it's still kind of like in a still death state, whereas there's much more warmth and activity at the other pole that's producing life. So within our human being, we have the death pole and the life pole, which is why one of the books I've got here, lectures by Rudolf Steiner, is called Dying Earth and Living Cosmos. Dying Earth and Living Cosmos. It's pointing to this reality of the two poles, the dynamic duality between the two poles, where the Earth is kind of in a dying, decaying state, and the living cosmos is bringing new life in. That's kind of like the limbs connecting to the head. So, but the upshot is that anything that is dying and decaying produces conditions for new growth. And Rudolf Steiner makes the comment in his lectures that this is where all the strange plant and animal beings emerged, was out of this state of dying and decay. He says if you took a placenta, for example, which was something that was alive and it was feeding something, being gestated and came to life. But if you took a placenta and you kept it in a moist place, and then after a while you cut it open, you would find all sorts of things crawling out of it. This thing that's decaying and dying actually produces new life. And so this is why there's a real livingness going on in the cosmos, because of this dynamic between things that are dying and decaying and things that are living. So stay with me here. This expulsion of the Earth out of the sun that took place at one point, and then eventually the moon came out of the Earth, which, you know, science verifies that, but they kind of describe it differently. That led to a new independence for the Earth. A new independence, which what that means is that the way things reproduced changed. Because up to that point, the sun and moon holding the Earth were directly causing reproduction to take place. But after that, the responsibility for reproduction was placed upon the human itself and animals itself. Let me just read a quote here from Steiner. It is true that we all descend from one human being. He's talking about the Adam Kadmon. That being was the Earth itself. It was only after the sun had split off that the Earth died and the animals crawled out, just as animals still crawl out of dead, decaying tissue. The other thing that occurred was that the reproductive forces remained behind. The only difference was that they were no longer stimulated by the sun from inside the Earth, but the sunshine coming from outside. So when the sun and moon separated from the Earth, this power of reproduction was conferred upon the beings themselves. Thus, the animal and human realms have seeds and eggs, or sperm and ovum on the inside to do the reproducing. This is a vestige of what was at one time done from the exterior, the sun and moon. And still, to some extent, they are involved in reproduction. We know the sun and moon have an effect on our reproductive aspects. Women particularly know the connection of the moon to the reproductive life. But it was a big step forward with this separation, because more and more the power has been placed within us by the cosmic intelligence. Another quote from Steiner. If we look at the surface of our Earth, we must say that it looks like a fossilized human head. Think of that. Yeah, when we look at the surface of our Earth, we must say it looks like a fossilized human head. We actually walk around on something dead that must once have been alive. We actually step on fossilized substances that used to be alive. The Earth was once a gigantic human being, then it died, and today we walk around upon its fossilized body. So the main point here, if the Earth is dead or it's kind of in a dying, decaying state, which is also what science says. Science really sees life upon the Earth, but that the Earth itself is a dead kind of a rock, a golf ball in space with things growing on it. But if it's dead, it must have been alive at one time. Anything that is dead must have been alive at one time. So we have to acknowledge that. And one aspect of dying is this aspect of regeneration. So the part that is connected to life of the cosmos, the sun and moon, is regenerative. So the reproductive aspect of humans, the seeds and eggs, is connected to the sun and moon. And the other part, our head pole, which tends towards death, this is the brain material, our brain cells, which is constantly in a process of dying off. So there's a lot right there. And before I move on to something else, I want to stop and see if there's anyone who has some questions or comments regarding this thing of the birth of a head that's got something of a dead pole to it. I want to actually move into an artistic exercise before we proceed. And with this, you're going to need to get some paper and pencil crayons. So we have paper and pencil crayons out here for people. And when you have that in hand, you're going to move the hand in gestures that emulate a sense of roundness. Just a sense of roundness. At first, kind of like a soft ball of slime or a mushy brain, right? That's how our brain started, is kind of as this mushy ball of slime. Get into a sense of roundness. I'm going to do it on the screen here in a moment, but I'll just finish the instructions. Then you let the roundness become firmer, less mushy, more defined, like an enskulled head. Going to evolve from this mushiness to an enskulled head. So firm boundaries to this roundness. And then over time, let the gesture move from roundness to straightness. So something's emerging out of the roundness, growing out from the center and moving towards the periphery, even beyond the periphery, straight lines. And feel the qualitative difference between the gesture of enclosed roundness and these outward moving lines. Very simple kind of exercise, but have some fun with it. Find your style. Some mushy orange. Mushy but roundness. Yeah. Be like your brain on a Monday morning. And then you start to firm up. Give it kind of an enskulled sense of boundary. So this mushiness is being held in. And then you're going to move to straight lines. We could call them vertical lines, but they're not all going to be going up and down. They'll be going in all directions. Feeling the qualitative difference. This is going to be one of your human assignments for the week. It's an artistic activity. Which do you prefer, the roundness or the straightness? Just another few moments. And you can do a few of these. You can keep doing them while I'm talking if you wish. This helps to bring in the right brain, imaginative capacities, which are so important for really being able to see the whole picture of things. And important as the basis for the new clairvoyance we're needing to evolve. So the title of this session is How Did the Human Hatch? Thinking along Darwinian lines, that's kind of the picture that come out of the stream of things being laid, hatched, and so forth. But if the human was as big as the earth at one time, one human as big as the earth as it was at that time, that size, which was even bigger than our condensed earth, kind of like this big baby in space, how did we come to be these small things? Well, this is when we can pick up some of Darwin's half-truths with our thoughtistry and think in terms of how we conventionally speak of the single cell creature that divided into multicellular creatures that through the process of interacting with the environment or natural selection made by nature, things did ascend into higher life forms. And I'll show you another chart for this. Got lots of visuals tonight, as you can see. So here is a diagram made by Haeckel, his genealogical tree. showing this evolutionary tree with all these branches coming off. There's the fishes, amphibians, primitive reptiles, birds, primitive mammals, beaked animals. We got rodents, hoofed animals, sea cows, and up this tree, bats and vertebrates, half apes, and then we get into chimpanzee, gorilla, orangutan, gibbon, and up here at the top of the tree is the man. Okay, so something's going on here that we can't really deny. We see in the fossil record these older, smaller, lower life forms. Well, I shouldn't use the word smaller because actually they were bigger. If we go back to the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and the dinosaurs and the megatherium, they were bigger. They've been getting some ways smaller, but they did start off originally as these unicellular creatures that came out of that primordial slime that we talked about, that soupy slime from that period we just looked at. Here's another tree here. Let me rotate this so you can read it. Here we see pre-man, primeval man, ancient man. But we're looking at these branches on one side, ape and monkeys. But see how this chart's a little bit different because it shows how the through line is the human. And these side branches are the primates. So it's kind of pushing this idea of how the human has been on the main track, and here we've got these other primates that are side tracks that are kind of going parallel to the development of the human. It's not necessarily showing that the human evolved out of apes and monkeys, but that they grew out of the human. The human didn't grow out of these primates. The primates are offshoots of this through stream of the ancient human. Here is an important diagram really showing more of a spiritual scientific perspective where we've got these two streams that are happening at the same time where, okay, here on the bottom line, we've got physical evolution. Things are ascending, right? It's showing the mineral kingdom, plant, and then the animal kingdom, invertebrates, right up to lower mammals, quadruped mammals, primates. But what's this other line that's descending? Well, for one thing, it's showing these epochs, which I haven't really talked about. I should mention the Polarian epoch, Hyperborean, Lemurian, and Atlantean epochs. This is showing different stages of this current iteration of the Earth, where it's subdivided into subcycles. I'm going to pull up this other thing here, just to give you a quickie on what these evolutionary epochs are. Okay, this you're familiar with the ancient Saturn, ancient Sun, ancient Moon. Here we are at Earth. Here's the future stages. But within the Earth, there's these evolutionary epochs. Again, occult history. You're getting a little crash course on occult history. The Polarian period, Hyperborean, Lemurian, Atlantean, and here we are now in the first post-Atlantean epoch. And that has sub-cycles within it that. We won't look at these now, but that's what these cultural ages are at the bottom here. So, yeah, these are earlier sub-cycles of our current Earth. So that's what we're looking at here on this line of descending, where while we have this ascension from these lower forms, there's actually a descension of the human meeting in the middle. This is the middle path we're speaking of, where these forms that started out of mineral into these living beings, eventually the primates, is being met by the human descending. So this is where we have to make a distinction when we use the word human, that we have a human body, but we also have a human spirit. Human body and a human spirit. And the two are being brought together here at this meeting point where there is an incarnation of the human spirit into a body. So another point to make on this is that there's different kinds of life. Looking at this, we would call this biological life, right? And that's what science looks at. It's looking for life. It's looking for biological life. They go to the moon. They're looking to see if there's biological life there. You know, if there's water, even some bacteria, please. Is there any life here? Considering life as a biological thing. But here with this other stream, we're talking about spiritual life. That spirit is a different form of life. And there's actually a third form of life. I'll just plant a seed right now with that, because where they meet in the middle between physical, biological life and spiritual life, in the middle is what we could call soul life, the life of soul. And we'll start to unpack that next session when we get into Carl Jung, who really was a pioneer mapping the landscape of the soul, of the interior. Soul life. So there's biological life, there's spiritual life, and in the middle is soul life. We're really looking at a difference between the human and the animal. We have to ask that question. What is the difference between a human and animal? Because the conventional theory is that the human is just a higher form of animal. We've ascended out of the animals. And it's true, we have similar bodies. You could say, you know, our bodies have an animal-like quality to them. We share a great deal of DNA. Over 90% of our DNA is shared with the primates. At one point in scientific history, they were saying the proof that there's a difference between humans and animals is humans don't have an intermaxillary bone. They're lacking an intermaxillary bone, which is a bone that meets in the upper palate that you find in animals. It's kind of like two tongs that come together. But ironically, Goethe, our dear friend Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who's somewhat of a patron of this work, he discovered that the human actually does have an intermaxillary bone and blew away that theory that said that was the main difference. That's the thing that was the distinguishing factor between humans and animals. Kind of ironic, because he's the one who's really a champion of the higher nature of the human being, but he blew away this theory that used that theory as the distinguishing factor. But going to Steiner, Steiner's depiction says that the human is, in a way, an archetype that was there from the beginning. That this descending part, this descending line, is something that was there from the beginning, and an archetype, a model, a mold, and that evolution is the process of fashioning a suitable vessel for the human spirit to enter. That human archetype has been there from the beginning, fashioning this ascending line into a suitable vessel for the spiritual human to enter. Why? Why does this process take place? Well, let me ask a question. What do we do every morning? What do we do every morning? We wake up and we get up. Quite simply, we wake up and we get up. We come into consciousness, which is accompanied by a coming into verticality. We can see that there is a correlation between our physicality and our consciousness. Our verticality is something we have over our animal relations. That is a major distinguishing factor. So in the course of creative evolution, the human was involved from the beginning in shaping a vessel that would eventually be entered. And this is kind of a side note, this entry into the vessel is sometimes referred to as the fall in the story in the book of Genesis. This fall from a paradisial state, paradise, is this entry of the human spirit into a human body. But before the human spirit could enter a human body, the process of evolution involved a lot of trial and error. The animals actually represent aspects of the artistry of the cosmic intelligence, where aspects were in a way off-castings. The animals could be considered off-castings or excretions, rejections of unsuitable aspects, which sounds a bit negative, but it's not unlike an artist, such as a sculptor who is chipping away at pieces of the stone that don't fit the ideal. So as we saw in the diagram, there's this human incoming, and the animals are off-castings of things that were not suitable aspects in sculpting a vessel into which this archetype could enter. So each animal in a way shows an evolving in a certain direction that was too extreme to serve this central thread of human evolution. But this is not to say that animals don't serve in the overall development of things. It's not like they're just cast off and thrown into the garbage. They're held back humans, right? We saw that it's all humans that are at different levels of evolution. Some have held back, and they serve as a foundation for us to move forward in evolution. These previous stages of humans that are really in the minerals, in the plants, in the animal realm are the foundation upon which we stand. We stand upon their shoulders, even though they're held back in their evolution. And in the next cosmic cycle, which you saw on the chart coming after Earth, after this current one, the humans will be helping these held back humans, which are right now animals, to make, you could say, a quantum evolutionary step forward to complete their human stage of evolution. So there's a lot coming in the future. It's kind of like they held back, they serve as a foundation for us. Then as we move forward, we're going to help them move forward into their human stage of evolution. The same can be said about the plant and mineral kingdoms, which are also containing elements of earlier human development, but are held back, or they couldn't graduate at a certain stage. And I'll explain more of this later. This is probably a very new concept for you. I don't think this was taught to you in science class back in high school. But if we engage, as Goethe did, observing the phenomenon to see what we notice, practicing phenomenology to see what we can notice, we can see from the mineral to the plant step, there is this reaching up into verticality. Out of the mineral into the plant, there's this reaching up into verticality. So the plant shows this pure archetype of growth of a living being that goes vertical from the horizontal plane. But this gets lost when we observe the animal world, right? We see animals floating, flying, creeping, crawling. There's a loss of verticality in animals that has been regained in the human carriage, in the human vessels. And therefore, animals don't have the same potential for consciousness, conscious cosmic connection that the human being has by virtue of their form. You could say the cosmic intelligence is in the animals, but the animals are not consciously in the cosmic intelligence. Cosmic intelligence has played into animals, but the animals are not consciously in the cosmic intelligence the way humans have a potential to be by virtue of our vertical stature. It's interesting how dogs will get up from their forelegs, from their horizontal position, and stand on their two back legs. They get up and they jump up. You know, they get up on humans and they're all excited because they want to be included in what the human's doing, right? They'll get up on their legs at the table. You see that. Oh, by the way, speaking of jumping up and leaping up, it reminds me of what Plato said. In addition to breathing, eating, drinking, and sleeping, every creature has instinctual need to periodically leap up into the air for no other reason than because it feels so good. So let's do that. Everybody get up, leap around for no other reason because it feels so good. Ah, so good. So good. Oh, leap around. Like Plato said, Plato time. Woohoo. Okay. So where was I? I was talking about dogs jumping up into this vertical position to be included with humans. They come into verticality. And this is what domestication does to an animal. And it kind of points to the future. When animals are around humans, they take on some of their traits. They take on some of their energy. And when an animal is domesticated, they take on the stamp or the type, the archetype of human nature. And they emulate it to some degree, like jumping up, excited, and wanting to be part of the party. But let us be clear what direction the stamping is coming from. The stamping of human nature onto an animal through domestication, it's a top-down gesture. It's not something that's coming inherently out of the animal. It's something that's being stamped onto it, coming down from above, from the archetype of the human upon the animal. This is pointing to the future where humans will be assisting animals in their evolution to a higher degree to embody this archetype of human nature, which is why I use this title, this overall title, Human, Not by Nature. It's something coming from above down into nature. And it's showing a working of the human ego, which is a force that works against gravity. It's the levity. It's the levity I mentioned earlier. It comes from the human ego. Animals are very much subject to gravity. They're looking down at the ground. They lie down, so forth. But this human, with this verticality, which is coming down from above, the stream from above, brings levity and is what has brought the physical form into upright verticality. It's the ego working into matter. So, in fact, this descending human ego is an uplifting impulse or agent in the world, or at least it should be. It's an uplifting agent, not just for itself, but for the entire planet. Just as the earth was in the sun, and now the human is in the earth, it can bring that spiritual life into the earth of the sun. We see how the sun is such a big influence and still is, because everything goes towards the light. Everything moves towards light. But now the light of the archetype is the guiding light. The archetype of the human and the ego is what's going to guide creative evolution towards its destiny. Because there is a destiny. There is a destiny that things are heading towards. Just as things head towards the light, things are moving towards the archetype of the human. It's what Aristotle referred to as the final cause. The final cause. If you planted a seed of a rose, you know eventually it's going to become a rose. It has a destiny to become a rose. If you plant the seed of a tulip, eventually once it's gone through all its stages, it's going to be a tulip. That's its destiny. Same with a puppy dog or a human. It's eventually going to arise and arrive at its destination because it's following the light of its archetype. Let me throw up some more visuals here. Here we've got some interesting images, skeletal structures. We're looking at the skeletal structure of a penguin, a gorilla, a human, and a kangaroo. So, yeah, comparing the gorilla, we can see that it is much more subject to gravity. It's not designed, it didn't reach the form that could contain the archetype of the human ego to uplift it. So it's a bit devolved, actually, from the human. It's a devolved human. The human didn't evolve out of the gorilla. The gorilla is coming out of the human stream because it didn't rise to contain the archetype of the human ego. So its form is more subject to gravity. And you can see how its arms are long and its legs are short. So it can walk more on the earth and less in the cosmos. Even its neck is turned more towards the earth. Whereas the human, its arms are long and its arms are short and its legs are long. So it can stand upright and walk on two legs. You look at the kangaroo, its arms are even shorter, its legs are even longer, but they're all crooked and it needs a tail in order to stand up. We don't need a tail to stand up because we're embodying the human archetype, which is really this vertical gesture. And then lastly, we've got a penguin, which penguin's pretty vertical. But there's a trade-off here. In order to come into this verticality, you had to give up the ability to fly. It's a bird that doesn't fly, but it can walk on 2 feet. That's nature and the cosmic intelligence playing around in the field of infinite possibility. Here we see a young chimpanzee. Looks very human-like. Flat face, round head, very vertical gesture. And actually, chimpanzee, when it's in the embryo, doesn't have hair on its body. It only has hair on a head. So very human-like. But it devolves as it evolves and grows, where the snout comes out, the loses the flat face, the verticality is lost. So it's like couldn't quite become human. So it devolved into this form. We didn't evolve out of chimpanzees, they evolved out of us. Here we see the different feet of different primates, and here we have the central stream, the human foot with the 5 toes, whereas here we've got feet that are like hands with opposable thumbs, opposable big toes, which allows them to hang from trees. They are still dwelling up in trees. The human foot is designed for being on the earth because that's what the human is destined to do. It's destined to bring the cosmic intelligence down to the earth, to walk upon the earth, not hanging in trees, but to be grounded on the earth. So the central stream here shows a much more generalized capacity where these are specialized to hang on to things with their feet and hands. And that's another distinction between humans and animals. Animals are all specialists at different things, whereas a human is a generalist. They can do a lot of things generally, but animals are all specialists at different things. You can see here also same idea in the embryonal stages. Here we've got crocodile, hen, ape, and human. They all start off generally the same, but then they all go in different directions. They all couldn't quite rise to being human, so they took side trips, detours on their journey to becoming human. Here we have a calf bison. See how it's got a very general quality to it? This could be a cow, could be a deer, could be a calf of many different species of ungulates, hoofed animals. But then as it grows and matures, it becomes very specialized. This is very recognizable as a bison. But when they're young, they have this very general quality, just like the chimpanzee. It look very human-like, but then as it matures, it really shows how it specializes and takes a very specific, specialized direction in its growth. Same thing with horses' hooves. The older forms of horses actually had more of a general quality, hand-like quality with fingers. But then over time, they lost the fingers and have a hoof that's like one toe. They only needed one toe to do what they do as a horse. We could talk about hands. The human has these 5 fingers, which are very generalized for doing a lot of different things, as opposed to fins on a fish, wings on a bird, claws on a sloth, hoofs on a horse. They're all specialized to do a specific task. Same with teeth. A human has a very general mouth. We're omnivorous. But you look at a rodent, they've got mostly incisors, the front teeth. You look at ungulates like cows, they have mostly molars, the big ones like we have at the back. Canines and felines, they have mostly the canine teeth. We've got those in the middle. So we have all 3 to give us abilities as a generalist, where all the different species have branched out with specialized capacities. So we're saying much of what we observe in creative evolution has been in support of human evolution, or Evo incarnation of the human ego. Evolution is about the human ego coming into a suitable vessel, which currently, right now, is the body we have. But everything else we see around us is held back humans, becoming the foundation for everything to move forward. And this might sound a little egocentric or anthropocentric to suggest that everything revolves around the human, as if the human were here to be king and dominate everything else. And this can be an issue in terms of how we share the earth with the other inhabitants, if we just think that we're the central and dominant force. But what Steiner is saying is that everything is the human, right from the original warmth of ancient Saturn, which still remains today. That warmth is still with us today, where the warmth in our blood. The warmth in our blood is a vestige from that initial stage of ancient Saturn. It's in all the warm-blooded mammals. And that warmth is actually meant to manifest as love. That's its ultimate destiny, is the warmth from the inception in ancient Saturn that we contain within us in the warmth of our blood is meant to manifest as love. Love of the cosmic intelligence that started this whole project. And this love is meant to manifest as service, not to be egocentric and self-serving, but service to everything else beyond the human ego. This word ego comes from the Latin and means I. I love that letter. It's just one vertical line. The I am, self-aware, self-creating, coming into verticality and uprightness. We use this phrase, an upright person. When we say that, we're not talking about their posture. What does that signify of their interior? Or we say someone has integrity. Again, it's referring to something of their interior. And this is part of what differentiates a human from an animal, which will lead us into an examination of the moral life of the human in a future session. Because that's one of the reasons we are human, not by nature. But let me just give a little summary of summaries, that it's all about the cosmic intelligence playing in the field of infinite possibilities, fashioning, stylizing a suitable form of dress in which to be embodied in. So let the fashion show of evolution continue. What's ahead? Up next, Jung is up in the next session. Jung was one of the first to speak about the archetype in his mapping the interior landscape of the human psyche. So we'll go deep in there in the next session when we explore Jung's depth psychology. So now I'm going to give the human assignment for the week. Then we'll have time for any comments and questions, followed by some music making for your relaxation and dining pleasure. So the human assignment, number one, your thoughtistry. Thoughtistry. How were you raised? What ideas were put into your mind about the origin of the human? From God? A stork? An ape? Slime? Cosmic intelligence of the universe? Was an idea pressed upon you dogmatically? And did it jive with your own thoughts and intuitions? And how have your thoughts evolved over time? How far have you come in your own thoughtistry as a thartist to create your own pictures of your own human origin? And how do you identify now? The second human assignment is an artistic exercise, the one we did this evening during the session. With paper and pencil, move the hand in gestures that emulate a sense of roundness, at first like a soft ball of slime or a mushy brain. Then let the roundness become firmer and more defined, like an enskulled head. Over time, let the gesture move from roundness to straightness. Really, this sense of verticality, something emerging out from the center of roundness, growing away from the center and moving towards the periphery. Feel the qualitative differences between the gesture of roundness and these moving outward lines. And the third exercise is, of course, the ruck shell. Take a few minutes. Thank you. Yes, you got it, Michael. I was waiting for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Never fail. Take a few minutes each day to review the events of your day in reverse order. View yourself from an objective, higher perspective. Going through your day backwards, what do you see? What are you shown? What do you learn about yourself? This is a way to strengthen many things, including mental picturing, memory, empathy, and self-knowledge, which is the most important knowledge of all, as well as connection to your higher self, the Rakshal.